Good evening, everyone. I see that our chair is about to join us. That still puts us one short of quorum, so we'll wait a few minutes and hopefully have several other committee members or task force members join us. I did get at least 4 confirmations, so we should have quorum.
Hey, Mark, this is Jose. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Mark, you look and sound good on the stream, so you're good to go, okay, whenever you start.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Good evening. It's Jonathan checking in.
Oh, perfect. That gives us quorum. Would you like to wait, Madam Chair, a couple of more minutes to see if anybody else arrives, or?
Yes, let's give it maybe 2 more minutes.
Sounds good. Just for everyone's information, Miguel Hernandez also confirmed that he would be here at the meeting. I did not receive notice from Rosa Estrada and Andy Farias.
Okay. And I just received an email from Mauricio Felix.
Yeah, I was going to
He
say
is
Mauricio.
resigning. He's resigning.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I was just reading the email.
Oh, okay.
Does this all affect our quorum?
Well, I think that means that technically, no, it would still be the same 4.
Okay.
So we're still good.
Okay. So
But if you would like, we can get started and call the meeting to order, and then of course I'll leave it up to you all whether you want to take item 2 right now or table that to the end of the meeting.
okay.
Let me
So
first bring up the agenda for everybody. How about that? That would be nice of me.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm playing the role of Clarissa Cervantes
You're doing
because I don't know if you all know, but she's moved on to her next opportunity in life as of today, and so we'll be figuring out who will be replacing her role in the long term. But for tonight, I will bungle my way through assisting you through the agenda.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to call to order the Fair Housing Task Force for February 9th, 2021, and the time is 6:07 p.m. Okay. Item 2 on the agenda, discussion and action on the request to excuse absent members. Do we want to cover this now, or do we want to table it until towards the end?
Move we defer it to the end of the meeting.
Anyone second that?
Second, Jonathan.
Thank you. So moved. Item 3 on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the January 12th, 2021 meeting.
The minutes were included in the meeting invite, so I hope everybody's had an opportunity to look at them.
Yeah. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
Yes, I have. Marcela Carria.
Okay. Are there any corrections or updates or deletions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Okay. Okay, agenda item number 4, discussion and action on changing the dates of future meetings to avoid conflicts with City Council.
Right, and I think we discussed this one, Mark Weber, Community and Human Development. We discussed this very briefly at the last meeting. City Council meetings have now moved from every other Tuesday at 9 a.m. to every other Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. And so that creates a strong likelihood that sometime in the very near future, we will not really have very much staff that's available to be at this meeting because we'll be in a City Council meeting. And so, wanted to put this onto the agenda to have you all discuss if, I think, it's up to you all. I think our preference would be a Wednesday or Thursday evening, but really it's we can make just about anything work except for Tuesday evening. And Monday evenings are tough because council also does work sessions on Mondays, and those tend to run long.
We saw that. We saw that. It's open for discussion.
This is Bill Schlesinger. I have a permanent Wednesday evening conflict. So I'd propose Thursday unless that kills somebody else.
This is Marcela Carrillo. Thursday sounds good to me.
Okay. I'm also good with Thursday. Are we talking the same time on Thursday?
I was assuming that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd be open, to suggestions there, but it seems that 6 p.m. gives everybody a chance to finish up work and get here. And I assume we'd also be talking about the second Thursday rather than the second Tuesday. So the second week still also.
We have such a
Okay.
long commute these days.
Parking spots are killer. So we're looking at the second Thursday of each month at 6 p.m. to be our new meeting time and date. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion on this.
So moved, Jonathan.
Okay.
Second, Marcy.
Okay. All those opposed? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion moves. Right. Item number 5 on the agenda, discussion of next steps to address goals identified in council presentation for 2021.
Okay, thanks. I'll kick this off. I have a bit of not necessarily a presentation, but I'll walk through some thoughts that we put together as staff, and we'd very much like your input and advice moving forward. Of course, fantastic job, Madam Chair, in presenting the item a couple of weeks ago on that update.
Thank you.
I think it went over very well. We as an entire group, including all of you on the task force, got a very good response and high ratings from all over. And of course there, we talked about several things, and one of them was, the 3 main goals that the task force, wants to address in 2021. And, those were increasing affordable housing stock and looking at different ways to do that. Combating NIMBYism and looking at, our fair housing outreach strategies and, including messaging about that in our not just our fair housing outreach, but also in, sorry, I see that Nicole's raising her hand. Nicole, go ahead.
No, Mark, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I'm on my phone, and
Oh.
I don't know how I did that, so I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
It's right. And not just, messaging about the positive impacts that affordable housing development can have to surrounding areas. It's not just in terms of the fair housing outreach, but other opportunities that we can leverage to get that message out. And I'll talk a little bit about some ideas we have there. And then the third, goal was about expanding stakeholder outreach and getting more participation in these meetings. And so I'd like to kind of talk through, our thoughts on each of those, and I think we'll do it one at a time, and then I'd like to hear what you all think in terms of increasing housing stock, and what are the next steps to get moving on that. The first thing I'll say is hopefully at the next meeting of this task force, if not then absolutely the one following that, we'll be presenting to you our process for moving forward with a multifamily request for proposals to put some HUD home dollars out that can hopefully be leveraged with other resources to get a pretty large scale affordable housing project going. Now, in the longer term, we'll be able to make a pretty significant investment this year, and it's mostly because we've taken several years of home dollars and kind of bunched them together so we could have a greater impact and fill more of that gap that we identified in terms of somebody being able to use these funds along with, say, a 4% tax credit and fill in that gap that just doesn't quite make it work in some cases. But longer term, of course, we want to get the Joint Housing Task Force going. And that's something that we're looking at doing in the next month or so. And of course, the Joint Housing Task Force is, the whole purpose is to advise and provide input as we implement the regional housing plan. And under there are a number of work groups. And to talk specifically about increasing affordable housing stock, one of those working groups is looking at resources. And we think that what we'd like to do in the coming year is work with that Joint Housing Task Force and have this task force identify members who are interested in also working in that resources working group and some of the other working groups as well, but specifically what we're talking about now, the resources working group, and looking at to get started with the conversation on a housing trust fund, looking at what other Texas cities are doing in order to maintain a housing trust fund. Maybe taking what some of them are doing that might work for El Paso and really seeing, what can we do to start planning for the creation of and sustainment of a housing trust fund so that every year we can be doing one of these RFPs and really, making a significant dent in our growing gap in terms of affordable housing availability. That's the gist of it. But along with, what do we have to do to create it? What we also want to look at with that group, and one of the first questions I think that'll be really interesting to work out is, you need seed money for it. And, generally a pretty significant amount, we talk, $5-10 million, but, we're just kind of throwing those numbers around. We really want to look at what makes sense. What are we trying to do? And what's that number that we're trying to hit in terms of an initial seed of the Housing Trust Fund? And so I think that work with members of this task force on that working group for the Joint Housing Task Force will start really informing our policy moving forward in terms of funding additional affordable units. And so, with that, I'd certainly like to hear any thoughts that you all have.
Hi, Mark. This is Jonathan. I mean, some of my initial thoughts I think would be maybe we need to have a larger discussion, but what are our larger goals in terms of how much would we need in a trust fund or the housing trust funds for a community of our size? And then who are some of the alliance and partners out there in the world? Because I just don't suspect that we'd be the only ones. In fact, I wonder I think there's a nonprofit out there called Housing Trust Fund Project, and they have a .org address, and maybe they can walk us through these steps, or there are other steps out there that can help walk us through the ABCs of this. And then also seeing what would be our sources of funding, and also more importantly, how much the city would be able to commit themselves towards some of the seed money. And so that's my initial thought, is just thinking, how do we do this, and what are the goals that we would work towards incrementally and then long term?
So Jonathan,
Right, I
this is
think you're
Nicole.
right in line with what we're. Oh, sorry about that. I was just because I think that
That's
Jonathan,
okay.
your thinking is right in line with what we were thinking. That conversation that's how that conversation is going to start when we engage the task force with that.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I actually meant to have my hand up that time. Jonathan, I think you're on point. I think one of the things that we can do as the Joint Housing Task Force gets started and as we start to dig in more, we actually have a play-by-play, and that's my informal way of describing the process that the city of Austin went through from initial inception, ordinance resolution, through several bond issues that actually funded it, as well as the ultimate regulatory structure that governed it, what worked and didn't work. So we have a lot of that now from our sister cities in Texas. But I think it would be interesting, to Jonathan's point, to take a look at, you know, what philanthropy is out there to help support communities like ours, to develop a mechanism like this, because I do think, and Mark, I'm not sure if you said this, but I mean, I think everyone would agree that the likelihood of a bond anytime in the near future is, you know, pie in the sky at best. And then second to that, I think that from just the city perspective, I think that we would have to show, and this is me projecting here, but I think that we would have to show that something like this could work before we could really convince the entirety of the decision makers that the city itself should lean in with a direct financial investment. So I feel like there's a couple of steps that get ahead of, hey, city, this is how much, you know, needs to be committed to this locally, and what's generating that. And so, long story short, I think that we're asking the right questions, and those are the steps we're going to need to take to even begin to answer them. But I do think, particularly, we start to look at the conversation Mark mentioned about, you know, leveraging our existing federal funds to support tax credit projects and create, you know, big unit projects. I think that starts to play into the narrative for the council and for decision makers that says, these are the kind of numbers we need in order to have the impact that we're looking for. So that was a long-winded way of saying, Mark, you're right.
This is Bill Schlesinger. I think Dallas, there was an article in one of our magazines, has recently put together a housing project using adapted containers. Nicole, I'm not sure if you saw that or not.
Did, yep.
But one of I think our issues is that how do we create closer to NOAA's, the naturally occurring affordable housing, that would allow some of the private developers to get into the mix and be able to avoid things like Davis-Bacon. Because as soon as we touch public dollars, we raise the price about 20%.
Naturally occurring affordable housing.
Yeah, the acronym is NOAA.
No, yeah.
Now, I mean, the rents for those units were close to $1,000 in Dallas.
In Dallas, right.
But the cost of creating them was also probably a lot higher than it would be here in terms of labor rates and even land acquisition. So we need to start looking, I think. I know that we're never probably going to get tiny houses done, but if we're talking about homeless, tiny houses make a lot of sense. And the strategy behind creating housing isn't just a financial one. It's also a technical one.
Right, and I think that you would be if you're interested in it, would be a pretty important voice, you know, in those conversations as we're looking for it, not to overburden you any more than you already are.
Well, just because I'm old. So there are a number of nonprofits that are around that are national. There's the National Association of Latino Asset Builders, NALCAB. There's Unidos US that's been very collegial with a number of us in helping get dollars to do the upfront strategic work. Nicole, you were mentioning, putting the plan together. That's where I think we can most use the foundation, the national level dollars to begin to address that. NCRC, National Center for, it's the Reinvestment Coalition, pulled together a meeting with a major bank that's going to be doing an acquisition of all of another major bank in Texas. And they're looking at putting some significant dollars in play. And you've already been, Nicole, working with some of the foundations that are interested, that are corporation housed. And we need to build a bank of those. But that's going to be mainly for design and planning, not actual construction.
Any other questions or comments? Kimberly, I see your hand up.
Is this looking at strictly building new, units, or are we looking at, for instance, early on, we talked about how all the building was happening on the outskirts of El Paso, creating this, I remember Nicole was calling it like a donut hole. Are we looking at some of that donut hole that's already existing? Because I concerned with, we live in the desert, the environmental impacts if we keep building. The desert itself is delicate as far as environment is concerned. So will this be looking at existing units and the cost to convert them into affordable housing or for homeless folks? Are we looking at that too? Or is this strictly for building units itself?
Right. What I'll say is, we're open to everything. And in terms of filling the donut hole, one thing that we will be looking at is the city's land policy. And, what opportunities do we have there? Of course, we have, school districts represented on the Joint Housing Task Force. And, we'd certainly be interested in, whatever opportunities there may be with other centrally located properties that are suitable for, the development of new construction. But of course, the rehabilitation of affordable units is certainly something that needs to be done so that we don't have those units getting, so into disrepair that they're really not habitable any longer, and then we're losing stock that way. And so, I would really say that as we launch this endeavor, I don't think there are any tools in the tool belt that we're not willing to consider.
Okay.
And we're definitely going to be hyper focused on that donut hole, as you put it. Yes.
Okay.
So Mark, I think, and Kimberly, I think that's a really astute question, and you're on point about the donut hole. But what I will say, without going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, this is probably for another day, is that I do think we're very interested in how to leverage a certain percentage of affordable housing units developed. Are y'all getting an echo, or is that just me?
A little bit of an echo.
I'm on my phone, so I apologize.
Sounds good now.
Anyways, taking a portion of affordable housing units that are developed and creating and filling the gap for permanent supportive housing in our community. And I think that PSH is still something that has been this sort of nebulous item for us, at least at the city, that we're really seeking guidance on, because We don't really know what the gap in units is. We don't know how many units we're even talking about. You know, there's challenges in terms of, you know, the word permanent and what that means and the case management that's associated with that. Where does the money come from? A lot of questions, but I think, you know, Kimberly, when you ask a question, and I think Bill also brought up homeless, we talk about how we can, you know, leverage the kind of units we're building. I think that PSH is absolutely something we need to be looking at. I will tell you that right now, when you look at tax credit projects, the state is in the way to develop PSH. There's some regulatory, not regulatory, I guess it is regulatory. It's part of the application process. They don't exclude it. They don't tell you can't do it, but they make it really damn hard. And so, and then once it's damn hard, then it's not profitable. And then once it's not profitable, I've lost the developers. And so I think that that's really something that we also need to dig into and that's why, Kimberly, I thought it's an astute point. It's not just number of units, it's type of units. Where are those units and how are we doing that? So anyways, thank you for that question.
So, and Nicole, there's another issue, and that's timing. There is a Section 202 application that's on the street right now. It's due in May. Section 202 is senior citizen housing, which is not our primary issue, but it's a side issue. But the timing on the home grant, which makes sense for some other dollars, there's no way to catch it when you get a quick turnaround for federal dollars, because there's no way for the city at this point to do an advance commitment of any kind. I don't know if that can be addressed or not. And that could be part of your housing trust fund, at least in principle process, where the housing trust fund allows for a quick turnaround commitment of funds to match a quick turnaround federal offer.
I think you're right, Bill. I think that, you know, right now, you know, the big hammer in our box right now is home funds, and it's only big because we've sat on it for so long, right? But the agility is not there. It's just a big hammer. And so what we need is a source that can be more agile and flexible and can move quickly to meet the needs of a developer who's trying to meet a deadline like that. Not to say that we couldn't also leverage the home funds, but yeah, I think that's also timing. Mark, I think if we can start to look at that as well as we begin those conversations with the group, what kind of timing should we be looking at?
Right. And we had several conversations, you know, with developers or nonprofit, you know, Chodos, about, you know, what timing worked, and at least this time around, we were coordinating the timing with the cycle for LIHTC.
Which is perfect and makes great sense. Mm-hmm. But the flexibility issue, I think, is one that, because you got to plan that out so far in advance that any change in funding streams you can't respond to. Right.
Yeah, and then to emphasize what Nicole said, you know, with the Housing Trust Fund, it's incredibly more agile. So many fewer strings tied to it. Jonathan.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to ask, and we don't have to get into the specifics right now, but Nicole mentioned earlier that there were many things that were unknown in terms of what is needed for this deployment, and really the specific to the status of what are the needs are in our community. But and Nicole, I just wonder, is that because the city doesn't have that information readily available? Is it not the latest information? Because I just imagine that there are many community nonprofits, organizations here that have almost like a real-time tally of those that are displaced or those that seek emergency or transitional housing from whatever period to whatever period.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think that if you could see me, you'd see that I'm smile smirking right now. Because the answer to your question is yes. There are folks out there that should have this information readily available and able to share it with the city, but we've not been able to pinpoint a direct answer. In the 4 years that I've been sitting in this seat, I have continuously asked that same question that you just asked. And what I get is an array of numbers and justifications that don't really give me an analysis and an answer. And so it's not my intention to call anyone out on that, but I will tell you that's been an ongoing struggle for at least 4 years, particularly in the area of permanent supportive housing.
Okay. And I wonder, would there be any potential to maybe coordinate with HUD? I feel like I remember from my CDBG days that this was something that was a required data point that needs to be reported to HUD from those that are receiving some of their funding, and especially given this, what was it, like decades old transition from, I can't remember what direction, either rapid housing to sustained housing, or maybe Bill knows the proper term to use here.
Housing first. Now,
Yes.
is the term, right?
Yeah, I just feel like all
Yeah.
the data points are out there, and we're the last ones to know for whatever reason.
I agree. I think that this is definitely a conversation we should take to a part of the discussion with the Joint Housing Task Force, so that we can really granularize it in a smaller group. But what I will tell you is this, Jonathan, I think I can get my hands on what I would call success stories. I can get my hands on folks telling me how many people they placed this year. What I can't get them to tell me is, of all the people that they interfaced with, say you interfaced with 20 people, which is a way low number, but 20 people. But all you can tell me is not that you interfaced with 20 people, but only that you placed 10. And so I don't know, if I knew that if you interfaced with 20 and you placed 10, I can deduce that, okay, we need 10 more units. Is that why they were not placed? Is it because the units weren't available? Is it because they have a criminal background issue? What are the issues? And it's that analysis, that analytic, that doesn't exist. And the HUD required reporting is useful only to the point of math. I've yet to see the analysis. So that's something that we're digging in on, a little bit outside of the scope of the Fair Housing Task Force, but a lot in terms of our work with homelessness right now. And we're trying very, very hard to work with our community stakeholders and get them to open up about that analysis. So, but happy to have another conversation, because I don't want to take everybody down that road. But Jonathan, if you want to have a conversation about that, you can tell I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
Okay, that sounds good. And so I wonder if for next steps and guidance, Nicole and Mark, do you feel that we should do this through a subcommittee or work with the Fair Housing Task Force as a whole?
Well, I think we may need to look at, what forums we have and what the best forum is for that conversation. Not that we can't have it in several. It could be a smaller group of the Fair Housing Task Force, but honestly, I wouldn't want to give you an answer off the cuff, because I think that's something that we really sort of need to think through a little bit, if that's okay. But I'm going to keep that question here.
Let me speak to some of the issues, because we do a bunch of this stuff too, but not at a great scale. But in terms of permanent supportive housing, there are 2 or 3 issues that I think make it particularly challenging. One has to do with what it takes to become eligible for it. You have to have been homeless for a full year, or for a period that equals a year continuously within 3 years. And we don't have that many. So permanent supportive housing for us, we had to contact HUD and tell them we couldn't fill the 6 units we had following their strong criteria. We had to go down and reduce that criteria some to fill the units. We got permission to do that. The second thing is that what makes permanent supportive housing work is an allocation, essentially, for what's called a PRAC. In other ways, it's a rental agreement contract, and those dollars are not allocated easily. So there's only a certain number of dollars allocated to the city of El Paso, or this continuum of care, for permanent supportive housing. When you do more permanent supportive housing, you do less of other stuff. So rapid rehousing is the next one. A lot of folk who need permanent supportive housing, from our perspective locally, don't meet HUD's criteria. And so it's challenging to say, here's the one silver bullet when you're dealing with a complex network. Having said that, the only way we're going to get more permanent supportive housing is to be able to draw down more money. And Nicole's right, that's a data issue. As long as the data that we submit to HUD is not as rich and reliable as they're asking for, we're not going to get more dollars. So that was a trip to the weeds.
Yeah, long story short, Jonathan, that's definitely a rabbit hole to go down, and that's why I suggest maybe we have an offline conversation. Mark, I think let's huddle up as staff and think about what is the best way to engage the purpose of the Fair Housing Task Force with some of these issues that we're grappling with daily, because quite frankly, we can use all the help we can get and all the advocacy that we can get. And so we'll come back to you guys hopefully by the next meeting with some semblance of a recommendation in terms of how we can better engage in that conversation, because it is quite a thing.
Okay, that sounds good. And sorry, I didn't mean to derail us. Was that just like goal one? Where?
Yeah. So if you'd like, I can talk a little bit about combating NIMBYism and the next steps that we can take there. If everybody would be okay with that. Okay. Hearing no objections. So in that realm, what I think that we can do next, and just probably over the next month, is engage in a conversation preliminarily with Project Vita, who are doing the fair housing outreach through our CDBG funding, and just sit down and have a conversation about what is the messaging that we want to put out, and what are some ways that we can do it. One I thought that we have, and this also gets a bit to to expanding stakeholder outreach, is and which is of course the third goal. So maybe I'm jumping around a little bit, but that we ask Christina Lamore from the United Way to perhaps present at the next meeting to this group, because one initiative that the United Way is taking on is lifting up a community resilience center. And we think that there's a really good opportunity there to leverage that community resilience center with the work that Project Vita is doing to get the audience of those that truly are in a vulnerable position to understand not just what their rights are, but that there are resources to get them into affordable housing, and that the affordable housing that we have is high quality affordable housing that people shouldn't be scared of, or scared of coming into their area or into their neighborhood, and really how we can work that message and then get it to the folks that need to hear it. There's of course numerous populations that need to hear it, certainly not just the vulnerable populations, but also those that would oppose the development of affordable housing around them because of misperceptions that they may have. And so there, and one other item that I sort of want to bring up as we talk about this is that and I don't want to take us off of the agenda, but I do want to thank everybody from the public that signed up to speak on our item for the Fair Housing Ordinance Amendment. We got some great support there, but I also sort of wanted to call out that there was one piece of public comment asking to strike certain sections of the ordinance altogether, and I'm going to end this with a question for you all. But and essentially it was about striking exemptions that are listed in the Fair Housing Ordinance. Specifically, it's section 17.020.050 exemptions, and so I just wanted to give the task force just a very brief idea of what those exemptions are, and it's really that it exempts certain individuals or entities from the law itself under the ordinance, and those can include, for example, the sale or rental of a single-family house, a duplex, triplex, or quadruplex, no larger than a quadruplex, by an owner in very certain circumstances, or again, under specific circumstances, religious organizations, private clubs, and owners of housing that's specifically for elderly are exempt for a number of reasons. And while I think that the amendment that we had for the Fair Housing Ordinance was a very significant thing that we all carried forward very much, because of you all and the Fair Housing Task Force. Our question is that something that the task force would like for staff to look into more? And I'm sorry, Kimberly, I realized that I was kind of doing your job and calling on people, so I can stand back and
You are fine. No, keep
Okay,
going.
Jonathan, I see your hands up.
Thank you. I had just a couple of questions that came up as we started talking initially about the Community Resiliency Center that you mentioned United Way might have on the horizon. And I just have more of a general question that we can talk about and put in the parking lot here. But what is the role of a community resilience center like that of United Ways that they're proposing in a city like ours that has been so highly designated as a resilient city in general? Why? I guess the question asked another way is, why do we need a center if the whole city is resilient, and shouldn't that radiate throughout everything that's done? So that's just the first one, and then the second one would be just a comment on the potential exemption modifications. I think some of those modifications have to do with real estate law about which ones are exempt by the Texas Real Estate Commission and those laws. So I think they probably need to run in parity, but I'm not sure. There's probably other people smarter than me that can chime in on that.
Well, to your second point, that's what we would be looking at is, are there state and federal laws that require these exemptions? Because while we were able to amend the ordinance to add protections, one thing that we need to be very conscious of is that our Fair Housing Ordinance, in order for HUD to essentially acknowledge it or bless it, it has to be significantly similar to federal law. And so that's certainly something we would want to be looking at. And so you're absolutely right, Jonathan. And back to your first question, I am going to just let Nicole fall off on that, because that is all about Nicole.
So first of all, Jonathan, I love how your brain works. Why would we need a community resiliency center if the whole community isn't itself resilient? Well, the answer to that question is that as compassionate and as individually resilient as we tend to be as El Pasoans, we still need support structures. And one of the things that we learned last year, particularly in the context of COVID and looking at the mountains of assistance that we pushed out just from the city, right? So that doesn't even count all the other entities that were offering assistance. What we saw was a sluggish uptake. What we saw was a community that was intimidated by how to access assistance. And so from my experience, I had worked with the United Way immediately following the shooting of August 3rd. And we stood up what we called the Family Resilience Center at that time to directly assist the victims of August 3rd in accessing whatever they needed, right? Whether that meant trying to get them through the processes to be able to accept the philanthropic funds that were coming in, or if that meant, you know, trying to make sure they stayed in their house or that they were able to feed their families. So that the center itself is staffed by navigators. So these aren't case managers, but they are the people that when Nicole Farini needs help, I'm going to call. I'm going to talk to, you know, Christina at the Resiliency Center. She's going to remember my name and she's going to say, okay, Nicole, you need help getting rental assistance. Do you have this documentation? And I say, no, I don't have that documentation. Christina holds my hand until that assistance is in it and I'm able to access it. And so it's a great question, Jonathan, but I think that the purpose of the Resilience Center is to bolster access. And that's why there's such a close link to the Fair Housing Task Force and the outreach that Vida is doing, is because a lot of those COVID impacted families that are going to be interfacing with the Resilience Center that we're funding are going to be having housing related questions, discrimination related questions. And so that's what we're really, really excited to be able to leverage together, because that has money behind it. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. And I think the parallels are being readily seen in our community right now, too, with the way that the vaccine is rolling out and the massive confusion about, well, what's the difference between me signing up with the city versus this system with UMC versus the allotment that's going everywhere, and it happening to a population that's already disenfranchised and, quite frankly, not very digitally literate.
Absolutely right. And one last thing I'll mention about the CRC, the Community Resilience Center, is that we're doing it in partnership with the county. And what we saw in the rural areas, more rural area of the county, it's hard for me to say that because I think that even when you look at the breadth of El Paso County, we're still largely urban or suburban. But long story short, what we have in those areas outside of the city of El Paso is not just tenants that have informal agreements with, you know, landlords, and they maybe don't have digital access, but we're talking about folks that just will not interface digitally. They won't even interface sometimes over the phone. And so some of that outreach has to happen door to door. And so I know the county is working with the United Way in concert with us. So get this, you guys, and see, now you got me all jazzed and excited. It's 7:00 at night and I'm excited. But, you know, the city and the county have our differences. But when it comes to these issues, our department and our sister department at the county are in lockstep. And we're supporting this Resilience Center and we're pushing out our assistance in lockstep. You'll notice that a lot of the requirements for the county and the city programs are the same. And we're doing that on purpose. So sorry, you got me excited. And so I wanted to share that.
And so I guess just really quickly, you know, I'll return to my question because,
Yeah.
you know, if we, I don't want to put this the wrong way, but it's essentially, you know, as staff, we'd prefer direction from the task force, you know, rather, you know, if we responded to, you know, every suggestion that we get from individuals, we, you know, need more than 24 hours a day to work. And so, you know, again, I think our question for the task force is if you would like us to, you know, as staff, do a little bit more poking around in terms of those exemptions and you know, what flexibilities, if any, we may have.
So,
Yes.
Mark, when you looked at this, I'm hearing that you're unclear whether those exemptions are required to bring us into line with the federal findings, or whether they're in fact questionable with those federal findings. Is that true?
Right, and that's the initial work that we would want to do, obviously, before we even consider drafting any language or looking at any further amendments.
Well, the universe that I grew up in had all kinds of outs for people who just didn't want to do stuff. And that was not a comfortable universe to live in. So if these are required, or if these are in contradiction, I think we need to know that first. So I would appreciate, speaking for myself, for the staff to look into that question.
Agreed.
Okay. So
I support that, Jonathan.
Okay.
I support that, Kim.
Support it as well, Marcy.
Okay, so we'll take a look into that, and we can provide an update at the next meeting.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions?
I've got one goal to go, but I already, kind of
No, go ahead.
went through half of it talking about the Community Resilience Center and, engaging more, outside stakeholders. And so here, I guess all I really want to say on this is that I think a very appropriate first step, and we've talked about this a bit, is for, each of the members of the task force to reach out to their council representatives that appointed them, and maybe have a conversation so that you can understand their goals for you and for the task force. Things that they may want to bring in so that we can like the goal itself says, start engaging city council a bit more in the conversations that we have, here at this level. And then, of course, also having everybody start thinking about, what other individuals should we be inviting to present, or should we be inviting just to listen in, because they should be there and, may have comment when we get to public comment after listening, to the items that we've had. And so that I think is, the challenge that maybe we're putting forth to you all over the next month is to, think about who those folks may be that should be engaged in these conversations that we're having every month, and to have a conversation with those that appointed you to understand what their priorities are in terms of fair housing. And that's really all I have to say about this, but again, very open to comments, suggestions, or anything else that you may have to say, because that's the end of anything that I plan to say on this.
What was the name of the representative that asked questions on Monday night? Do you remember?
Right, I think there were several. I know that I hesitate to call out when, especially, when I may be wrong, because I know that several of them, were very keen on the item.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair,
I can get back to you on that. I can go take a look at the the video from that conversation, and I can send you an email and let you know.
Okay. Yes, Jonathan.
I do remember when I was watching your presentation. I believe, no, I know. I won't say I believe, so it doesn't sound misconstrued. I know that Rep. Hernandez provided feedback on the presentation, but then also talked about wanting to see these things come up more frequently. And I think that was just more of a reflection on that she wanted the council as a whole to be more involved whenever possible, because these things are important.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'll still take a look back and I'll send you an email.
Any comments or statements? Any questions?
Yeah, well, thank you. We have our work cut out for us for the next month.
Yes. We got this though. We got this.
Oh, yeah.
Agenda item number 6, public comment.
So anybody on the call that's not a member of the committee, or if you would like to say anything now, please chime in. I don't hear any.
I don't hear anything. Okay.
Sorry, Irma Avila says she has no mic.
Oh.
And she's listed as a guest. And I assume wants to make public comment.
Irma, you can post in the chat if you're not able to, and I can read it off to the group if you get it in time, because we are reaching a couple of final decisions before this meeting ends. But otherwise, we can share comments at least with the members.
And then bring baby back.
Okay.
Are we waiting for Irma or?
You just have to feed the buttocks. Not going to top it.
I'll let you know if I see it come up in the chat.
Okay. We're going to revisit item number 2, discussion and action on the request to excuse absent members.
Move to excuse those with prior notice and those without non-excuse, and to also send, if we can, just send a reminder to the council representatives that have vacant appointees.
Yes. Okay. And like I stated earlier, Mauricio Felix sent me an email that he is resigning.
Right, and I see that Rosa has joined us.
Okay.
Since the meeting started.
Okay.
And so I believe that would leave Andy Farias and Miguel. Are you here? I know that there's a telephone number that was here, but Miguel Hernandez wasn't able to attend as well.
And Miguel had prior notice?
Miguel had indicated that he would be here, and so I don't know if he's having technical difficulties, or I have no idea.
Okay. Do we know which district Mauricio was for? No.
You know what? Off the top of my head, I don't. But we'll find.
Nick.
Just reach out to them.
This is Nick. Let me double check, and I'll get right back.
Because there's actually a number of members whose terms expire in April, and so we're already planning on reaching out to those council reps to put that on their radar.
Actually, it's almost pretty much all of us. We terminate in April. So that's just something to think about, to get with your reps. How does this work if representatives are not, or replacements are not found? What do we do at that point?
Well,
Just keep going?
Yeah, those positions are then vacant. And so what we'll be reaching out, I mean, I think that you all should reach out as well, in particular if you're looking to be reappointed. And we'll be reaching out just to let the reps know that they will need to be reappointing or identifying.
Is it possible for your office to, because I know we wrote the new the lengths of terms of who can run again as or be appointed again as a primary, or who has to be an alternate. Is there a way that we can, get that? So
We can do that one-on-one with each of you.
Okay.
Nick, make a note of that, and we'll go ahead and send an email individually to each of you, letting you know, where you stand in terms of eligibility for reappointment.
And I just wanted to let everybody know that Mauricio is representative. His district is 1.
Number 1. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So number 1 doesn't have a primary or an alternate, and is that what I'm understanding?
I'd have to check the roster in terms of an alternate, but yeah, we have some work to do on that.
The alternate that we have
listed
for the alternate that we have listed, Ms. Kim, for District 1 is Christine Gallegos.
Okay. Okay. So perhaps she'll be, contacted to attend the meetings in his stead, since we don't have a primary. Yes.
I think that we can definitely reach out to Ms. Christine. Yes.
All right. I just want to make sure we have quorum.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, we have Miguel Hernandez and Andy
Farias.
Farias. Okay. Had to think about that. I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, there's currently a motion.
Okay. Oh, seconded? Anyone?
I second it. Marcy Carrillo, second his motion.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Did we have any public comment? I want to make sure did she type anything?
I don't see anything in the chat.
No. Okay. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Please.
Everybody wants to stay?
Madam Chair, I suggest you adjourn the meeting.
Can I get a second?
A second.
So
Marcy.
moved.
Okay, so
That by
moved.
unanimous consent. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, 7.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Mm.